All right. Well, I've got 2 o'clock Mountain Time over here, so we'll get started. Thanks for joining us for the tech coffee break. Dave Ripplinger was kind enough to present a pretty great topic here, so I'll stop talking and let Dave take it away. So,
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Hopefully your expectations aren't too high. I always like low expectations and then beating them. So just for those of you who don't know me, I'm the bioenergy economic specialist with NDSU Extension, and I'm also in the Department of Agribusiness here on the main campus. Today I'm going to talk a little bit, maybe it'll spur some discussion and some sharing of what we're doing and maybe what we can do better. Talking about using technology to better manage all of the things that we're bombarded with, both in our professional and personal lives. The motivation for this actually comes from some things I was doing early last month. At the beginning of July, I was kind of doing like a mid-year review of what I was doing and not doing well. And I actually ran across some learning, which had me again revisit how I manage my personal and professional time. And I thought I'd share it with you. And again, maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not, and maybe it just gives us a chance to revisit managing information and all of the things we have to do in our lives. I tried to make it a little bit snazzy with this retiring the ribbon piece. But I always find this ribbon piece just a great idea because I see this ribbon and that's great. I'm supposed to remember something, but what? And a lot of there's a really neat overlap between what technology is in this space, because really we're not able as humans to remember and do as much as we'd like to do without a little bit of help. And that help can take different forms, but the whole idea is we need technology and stored knowledge to do a better job. And it can take a lot of different forms. And I think what most of us do over time is we just have always made it up as we go. But it's always good to get tips and methods from other folks. And I kind of ran across a really awesome way of managing all of this stuff in the modern age. And I think that all of us experience this at whatever part of our career we're at. We're bombarded with information and needs, and there's so much noise. And to properly filter that and still be effective can be really challenging. And some of that can just take place here as we work in agriculture and related areas and extension, where there's so much going on. How do I know what I'm supposed to know and do what I'm supposed to do as effectively as possible? And then I think, too, we're all wrestling in the information age with this work-life balance in terms of where does my personal and professional life end? And I think that some of us do a good job with that and some of us don't. There's 24 hours in a day, 168 hours in a week, and sometimes it seems like you never officially switch gears, and we're bringing our smartphones along with us far too often and checking emails and responding to folks when really we need to unplug. And I think we're all kind of guilty of that. Have this nice little picture of an arrowhead, and the reason I have that is to think about technology really more basically. For those of you who don't know, I actually taught a national technology course before I came to Extension, and it's really important to think about what technology is, and really it's any previously stored effort, right? And so the whole idea with this arrowhead is someday previously somebody, maybe ourselves, made this arrowhead and it now makes life a lot easier. For some reason, I think we all tend to think, well, when we think technology, we mean electronics and high-tech stuff. And it doesn't really need to be that. It can be something as simple as an arrowhead, whatever helps us do a better job today using stuff that we did yesterday. And of course, being an extension and in education and research, this is kind of what we do professionally. But I think that in that informal, personal, and professional management, time management, organizational piece, we kind of lose sight of that and think, well, what's the high-tech thing that's going to solve all my problems? And truth is, it might be something as simple as an arrowhead that kind of gets us where we need to go. Life can seem complicated, and one of the things as economists that we do is we boil stuff down to simple methods and processes and models to do things. And a lot of what we do, even though our jobs, extension are similar to some extent from specialist to agent to staff member. Some of what we do is different, but a lot of what comes up, and what I found at the beginning of July, is a lot of the information overload and management stuff we need to do really kind of falls into place. And I'm going to give a plug to an author and a system, which I think kind of embodies this. And again, I'm not trying to sell anything, but other than the idea that this might be helpful to you. And so there's actually this system that's been out for about 20 years, and here's a nice picture of David Allen, who's the guru who came up with these concepts. And what his system is called is Getting Things Done. And so it started out as a book, and now there's a whole world. So if those of you are familiar with like 7 Habits and Franklin Covey, this is essentially another way of doing that stuff. And I think it's actually pretty good. Not that you need to read the book or spend thousands of dollars or hours and hours adopting all of this system, but rather to think about the really basic processes that he presents. Because I found it really helpful. Again, because I can do a lot of stuff, and I've gotten really good at doing a lot of the easy stuff when it comes to time management and managing projects. But it's kind of that next level where it's like I haven't quite cracked the code, and some of the things that Mr. Allen presents in his book in this system, I found is actually really helpful. So he's kind of got this method and this flow chart. So here's the methodology that he has, and this is borrowed from the website that this system maintains. The first thing is decide if you actually want to, if something is actually important enough to remember. And so if you think about that slide a few slides back, where there's just this bombardment of information, to actually sit down and say, okay, this is something that's important, so I'm going to capture it. And that capturing simply means that I'm going to make a note of it somewhere within my system. So what we might think is old school is I'm just going to write it down, paper and pencil or pen. I'm going to capture that idea. Maybe if I've got my phone with me, I might just take a note. Okay, there's something that happened in my work day or in my personal life where I need to write something down. Great example from personal life. We're out of milk. Let's write this down. I need to get milk. And what the getting things done kind of methodology says is don't delve too far into a lot of this stuff, at least initially, if you don't need to. It might just be taking note of it. Then that next step is to clarify, to kind of go back maybe at the end of the day and say, okay, yeah, I need to get milk. That's a really simple thing. Maybe it's something more complicated. Maybe it's, that you've got an email that you need to write. And it's a longer email, not the 30-second quick response. And you might put a little bit of legs to it to put it into your bigger week. The next thing you do after that is you organize it. So I'm going to take this idea, if it's big enough, and put it in the right spot so I can get it done. And then just jump into the end. Sometimes you just do it. The idea of engaging is actually doing this stuff, not just doing time management. The idea of reflect is that, at the beginning of the week or the end of the week or somewhat regularly, you're going to go back to all these lists and all these systems, however you do it, and actually think about where you're at, what you've gotten done, how you might need to reprioritize for the next day or week to continue to be productive. Kind of spinning it a different way, I think this is a really cool flow chart, which is kind of organized in the, what I'll call like the 1980s, 1990s way of doing things. So you get an inbox, something comes up, and maybe we can just talk about it from the framework of an email. Get an email. Okay, is it important? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just absolute junk, right? Even today, I found myself just going through, unsubscribing to some stuff. Don't forget to unsubscribe to stuff if it's junk all the time from a source that just doesn't give you anything of value. It's all noise. Sometimes you just hit pocket things where it's an important piece of information, but you know what? It can store to memory, you're going to junk it, or maybe you're going to file it. And so in the case of an email, you might have like an archive system, really basic kind of thing. So, I mean, in a lot of cases, that's a lot of the things that we get. And this could be an email or walking down the hall or even from a meeting. You file it in your brain, you throw it away, or maybe you save it. Maybe you save some notes. The next step is, well, maybe there is something that's actionable. So maybe it's an email I need to respond to. And a really good rule of thumb is if you can do it in less than 2 minutes, if it's not going to distract you, just get that email done. If the email is going to take you more than 2 minutes, set it aside for a time when you're doing email. Otherwise, you can find yourself kind of getting scatter-minded and spending 20 minutes writing an email and kind of forgetting what you're doing. Beyond that, it might end up being something you put on your calendar, something we're pretty familiar with, putting on a to-do list, which is called that next action. And then there's also this kind of waiting for list. This is one of those higher level things you sometimes forget about. It's like, okay, I need to wait for Crane to get me something, and then it ends up getting set aside and then lost. Within the getting things done system, it's important to have a list of what those things are. For bigger multi-step activities, that's what becomes a project. For me, I do a lot of research, so I have multi-step projects all over the place. So this is just a list of possible to-dos, as well as how you might be doing them. So that's the plan. Kind of bombarded with a lot of things, but I'd ask you to go back, and I can share this with all of you, and of course this will be retained, just to kind of go through this and kind of revisit what you do on a daily basis, and just kind of think about, am I managing all of this stuff right? Am I keeping things that are really junk around? Am I misfiling things? Am I not doing a good job of my waiting for list? And the one thing too, which is really big for researchers, is that someday maybe cloud. I have a lot of someday maybe ideas. For those of you who've had the chance to interact with me, I like to refer to myself as an idea guy. And ideas are great, but you need to do the work. And so I've got a couple of pages or spreadsheets in Excel of a lot of someday maybe great ideas, or at least great ideas to me. It's not a bad idea to write those down, but you can also let them kind of litter the things that you need to do. So what I kind of did is, personally, I think there's kind of like two levels of dealing with stuff. And there's like the easy stuff you have to figure out, that you figured out on your own, as you became an adult, or maybe adulting, as Stacy was mentioning, you have to figure out certain things. There's things that you throw away and things that you keep. And again, this could be electronically, this could be physically, these could be notes and files. You're going to probably, most likely, I'd imagine that all of us have a calendar and a to-do list, right? And different variations of this can get you a long way, but it can still lead to some trouble. One of the things you need to do is, to me, is really helpful, is getting stuff off your plate. So if you look at my email inbox right now, my actual inbox, there's 3 things in it. It should be 0, but there's 3 things in it. I think it's really healthy to keep that inbox completely empty, and you can have a to-do or to-get-to folder, which I usually call end of day or end of week. So I'm not going to punch out for the day until I get through my end of day stuff, and I'm not going to punch out for the week until I get through my end of week stuff. But I don't want to look at a full inbox and to me, it just hurts my brain. It takes up bandwidth for absolutely no reason and makes me feel encumbered or weighted down. So I do that. The other thing too is, like with my to-do list, my to-do lists are really short. 5 things on my to-do list. I have a million things to do. But again, I don't want to feel encumbered by it. I had a great conversation with Brian Parman. We drove down to Kansas City. Brian, if you haven't met him, is our new financial farm management guy here in Extension Agribusiness. He'll be at Farm Conference. If you haven't met him yet, definitely go say hi to him. Anyways, he, myself, and Frayne were driving down to Kansas City for a meeting. On the way back, he had a great comment about how, farmers usually have 3 things on their to-do list, because you can't have everything on the to-do list because it would be too long. There are some things that are simply not going to get you soon, if ever. There's just too much going on in the farm, and there's too much going on in our lives to have this super long list. And again, I usually only get through, maybe 10 things if I have like smaller, call this person, email this person type things in a day. And I don't need 40 other things haunting me regularly. I used to have a to-do list that had up to 70 things on it. I'll be honest, in a given day, I learned not to look at the bottom part of that list. And I think that's important to have that shorter list. The last ones are the things we kind of can miss. And so the guy sitting there or gal sitting there with the clock, is the waiting for list. So to find a way to know how to wait for, and this can be really simple. You can just put reminders on your calendar. Some people have what are called tickler files, which I think is kind of funny. And so you basically have a tickle file. So at the end of the week or the end of the month, you might look in your tickle file and say, oh my gosh, this hasn't been gotten yet. Great case. I'm collaborating with the University of Minnesota Extension, and I needed to get in contact with a person there. I was actually not wanting to do more important things today, so I gave her a call, and she called me back, and she said that I was also in her tickle file, and she was going to get to me likely today. But let's be honest, I don't know if Maggie was telling the truth or not. It was on the to-do list. It's important, but it's one of those things you kind of forget about unless you make it part of your system. Since you guys can't see me in person, I had my air quotes up. The first thing is that someday maybe list, which I think is really important. But again, you don't want to see your someday maybe list every day, have it filed. And then the right two are the project plan and the project. What are these bigger things I have to do and how am I going to do them? Some people just can't manage projects, and some people like myself sometimes get lost in them. But figuring out a way to manage it's really important, especially as things get a little bit more complex. This is one of my favorite quotes. Your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. It happens to be David Allen, the guy who wrote this book. And so I'm going to pick on my wife since she's not on the call. And unfortunately, we're recording this. Feel free to share it with her. My wife is a fantastic person. She made the mistake of marrying me. And so then she gets included in talks like this. My wife, just like my mother-in-law, who I like less than my wife, is opposed to writing things down. They think it's a sign of personal weakness to write things down. My wife works full-time. We have 5 kids, and she's married to me. She needs to write stuff down. And it's really important, I'm a great idea guy, to take advantage of writing stuff down. And that is literally creating a repository of knowledge, and depending on how you do it, technology. This is really the heart of what I want to talk about, is that we can't handle this stuff, especially with work-life balance, especially with the bombardment of information and needs and requests, for us to kind of think that we're going to do this in our heads. It's impossible. It's not, you can't do it. I think I'm a pretty smart person, all humility aside. I need to write stuff down more often. Again, because great ideas are lost, things I want to do are forgotten. All of these intricacies just aren't there unless I actually put them somewhere. And that kind of combines these thoughts of, okay, technology is really helpful in this stuff, but the right-hand side of the screen is really important to realize we don't have to do high-tech stuff. It can be what I'm going to call 1990s management style, which can be perfectly effective.
NDSU Extension, Mercer County office.
Cindy, if you could view that, great. We can do old school stuff. We can do physical paper. We can have physical calendars. We can have physical files. We can write stuff down. And if that works, that is fantastic. I am not trying to sell you any product.
So I'm going to let you talk to her. Okay?
Ryan, can you
Hold on, please.
Cindy? But anyways, it's not to push advanced high technology stuff. Again, it's to find things that work for you. I've never been a paper planner person, or haven't been since high school. In high school, I used to walk around like a total nerd with a note card that had my to-do list on it. Since then, I've kind of moved towards most of my stuff in terms of my calendar, and my to-do list have been online. And again, that doesn't make me more high-tech or more, better than anybody else. That's just what works for me. And again, if paper and pencil works best for you, that's great. I know Frame is a paper and pencil planner kind of guy. And so he brings that with him, and that's how he does stuff. That's where his calendar is. That's his to-do list. Cool. That's great. That's what works for him. Again, it's to think what help us get through this process of managing all this information and all of these tasks, and managing projects efficiently. Whatever works best for you is A-okay. The far end of that, and this is supposed to be a joke because there's an app for that. You can push all of this stuff onto your phone. I can guarantee that you are going to have a very difficult time. To-do lists are fine online. Calendars are fine online. If anybody can manage a complex project with just their phone, I'd love to see it. There's some balance between these two of failing because you think you can have it all in your head and failing because you think you have it all on a small electronic device. I think that can be a challenge. Oh, and Becky has this nice thing. Use the Outlook calendar. Yes, please. Please use the Outlook calendar. I put everything on my Outlook calendar, and I'm the only one in my department who does this. And it is so unbelievably painful because people say, Dave, I'd like to schedule a meeting with you. And my default response is, great, I'm free at these times. Also, please check out my Outlook calendar. It is almost always up to date. What's unfortunate is that very few of my colleagues do that. And so this great benefit, and one of the nice things about modern technology is that we can connect and network and connect our management pieces and make life easier, and yet sometimes we don't do it. So yes, Becky, that is quadruple thumbs up. If anyone in this entire call or whoever watches this ever gets a point, please just use your Outlook calendar. We all are on the same calendar. And Ryan, you're fired. This becomes a challenge. So to have the paper and pencil versus the Outlook, at least go to the Outlook calendar when you're going to say, are you available? I mean, I always do that. I will go and pull up the Outlook calendar and plug in everybody's name, and it'll tell me who's available when, and that is at least a starting part. And again, I'm not saying you're a bad person, but there's a definite benefit of us using this common open system for scheduling things. There's more to life than email. And this isn't that there's more ways to communicate than email. There's, that email is the end all be all. It's really that I think that some people try to manage too much in email. And that there's a much broader system that you can't, just like, and this is actually a great segue, you can't manage all of this in Outlook either. And so I do use my Outlook calendar. I do use Outlook for my work email. I don't use it for my to-do list just because it doesn't work for me. And like Caitlin says, yes, I actually do have everything synced up for our NDSU, for our work system and my phone. And I also do that for my private system. I live on Gmail, and I can use that on my work PC if I want to, but typically I just keep that on my phone, as well as having my personal calendar on my phone, and I typically sync them up. Oh, and here's my little list. This is what I do currently, and this has changed within the last 2 months after I kind of did this. And again, it works for me, and it'll likely change, and it doesn't work for you. But it's just to describe that for this getting things done comment, where I know that I have an inbox in a number of different ways. Email. Otherwise, how else do I communicate with folks? How do I archive things? Where is my calendar for what types of things? This basically summarizes what I do. So most of my work communication outside of face-to-face communication and phone, obviously do with Outlook. My emails are there, although most of my emails, like I said, end up in archive quick or in my to-do list. My work calendar is in Outlook, and I sync that with my personal calendar, which is in Gmail. So I can see both of them, both sides. And then I also share, obviously everyone at work can see my work calendar. And for my personal calendar, my wife, my 2 oldest kids, and my mother can see my personal calendar, because our calendars often overlap, and so then we can see what we're doing. My email archive is all in Outlook, but not all of my archive things are in Outlook. Some people really try to push that way and think that it suffices. I've started using OneNote again a lot for one reason, like Caitlin said, so I can access OneNote on my phone. So OneNote is essentially a note-keeping system within the Microsoft ecosystem, right? I can access it from my personal computer, my work computer, my smartphone, and it's all synced up, which is really cool. That has my official work to-do list. It has my bigger project to-do list and my project planning thoughts, and also the archive as it relates to projects and project planning. On my computer, that's where I do most of my work. So I'm an economist, so I do a lot of number crunching and writing reports and documents. That, for the most part, is online, and then it's archived on my computer. I do know, and you guys might not know how to do this, you can access your work computer from other computers in a safe and secure way. I have a laptop that goes with me everywhere. So typically I have my my phone and my computer within 10 feet of me at all times. The last icon, which you might not know, is that's the Google Keep icon. It's basically one of many to-do list things. I have multiple lists as well as my official to-do list. My official personal to-do list I share with my wife, as well as like our regular shopping lists I share with her and other things. And that works pretty good. Just kind of step back. The point is not to sell any of these individual apps or software packages, but this is just to describe how I do it. There are many other systems. So, I mean, obviously this is Microsoft based. You could do this with the iPhone. You could do it within a Google ecosystem. I kind of have a meld of Microsoft and Google, and this tends to work for me. And I try to keep my work stuff on a certain side and my personal stuff on a certain side. My work stuff is primarily Microsoft based because it does work and the university provides it. And I keep my other stuff in Google, mainly because I'm cheap and I don't like Apple, and because there's a line between my Google stuff and my work stuff. So I know if I'm in Gmail, I'm doing personal stuff. And if I know if I'm in Outlook, I do my work stuff. And again, you can in the past I have accessed my Gmail account within Outlook. But right now I really use Outlook 365, so the online version. I don't even use Exchange and everything on my computer because it can end up for me, if I start melding that with personal stuff, then all of a sudden I occasionally write a personal email from my work account, which I just try and avoid, just to keep things separate. Just to kind of walk through this so you can kind of see how this stuff might work. Again, let's say, so I was in a meeting this morning, I had a really cool meeting with someone in the research office, and she's doing this really neat data visualization thing. So basically making really cool pictures and charts and graphs using data. Not Excel, in her case, she uses a product called Power BI. Really neat stuff. Anyways, we were meeting, so I just wanted to get to know her and see how she kind of does her stuff. And we had some interesting ideas. So one of those is that there are these user groups. So that's a piece of information. And so I wrote that down, right? And I actually, paper and pencil, I wrote it down at the end of the meeting. I took a picture of it with my phone, and it automatically goes into my Outlook. The person I was visiting with, her name is Christy. She promised that she'd email me about that, but that was also my reminder by taking that picture. And she did email me about an hour after our meeting, and I saved it. So it actually ended up in my email archive. So if you kind of follow that chart down, it became an in, and it was kind of dual purpose. The in first was writing it down on paper. That was my capture. And then I took a picture of it and sent it to my Outlook. And so that's kind of going to that reference file. So it was digitally recorded. She sent me an email, so that was also an in. And it led to two things. One, I did save the email, but I also joined two user groups, one in North Dakota, one in Minnesota, just to kind of stay abreast of what's happening. Pretty straightforward stuff. Emails can be all over the place. Again, sometimes it ends up being, well, there's a meeting coming up. Ryan and I had to visit on Monday to reschedule this meeting. And obviously I had my calendar, which was up to date. And I use Outlook just because that works for me. And we quick looked at alternative dates. Wednesday today ended up working out really, really well. So we scheduled a meeting. So obviously the scheduling of the meeting was a piece of information. So I put it on my calendar. I already had my presentation good to go. So it was simply changing those things. What I'd ask you to do, and again, we could talk about this now, is I'd encourage you to kind of walk through this and see how it works for you. Because to me, it's really cool, especially for dropping things, and also kind of decluttering our world. I decluttered my email a long time ago. This really has helped me declutter my to-do list and my action items, which are the same thing in this case. The other thing that I really like too is that it's part of the system. It's you're going to capture and or junk things really quick. You're going to come back to them maybe at the end of the day and say, okay, here's my list of quick notes that I did, and how's that going to fit in my system. Another thing I really like too is to come back to reflect. So at the end of the week, what did I get done? Next week, what do I want to do? And again, maybe this is just a fancy way of revisiting. Well, I have to evaluate my performance and plan for the next week, and really that's true. But sometimes having a system and one that's been ironed out is helpful. And so that was kind of what I wanted to talk about today. We've had some really good comments. I didn't get to talk about all of them, but I don't know if we want to discuss things or if you guys have questions for me. This is open time for us. And yes, Becky, I just filled out a doodle poll today for a completely internal extension thing. I can definitely go back one slide. Did you have a question, Susan, or did you just want to further absorb this?
All right, any questions or comments for Dave, or anyone want to talk about how they help, any ways that they organize some of their stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of a chaotic mess, like it's an organized chaotic mess, but
Mm-hmm.
that's my program, I guess. So.
Yep. And I won't believe for a second that this was so clear that there aren't questions, or that, and I'll maybe not helpful that it didn't jar some thoughts from you. So I encourage you, if you have questions or want to visit a little bit, I think that'd be great. Yeah, so Jan has a great question. So how and when do you archive? So one of the neat things, so if you're using Outlook, the university system is actually going to archive a lot of those things. So what I'm talking about here is simply having a file that says archive. And I only have, right now I have 4 folders in my Outlook. I don't file them in, I don't have 50 files anymore like I used to have. I have an inbox, I have an end of day, I have an end of week, and I have an archive. And the archive has thousands of emails, tens if not hundreds of gigabytes of information. And I'm obviously not going to go in there and find things by scrolling down. We have a great search function. So that's what I mean by archiving. In terms of preserving the material, there are ways to do that. So if you're using it on your desktop or on your personal computer, there's some pretty straightforward ways of saving what's called your PST file. That makes sense, but again, realize that the university system will maintain, I do everything online. I don't have anything on my computer anymore. And so I just have that archive folder. As long as that's there, the university system has my material. If I want to, I could save it, but typically I don't worry too much about that. But again, it's a monstrous mess of old emails, but I don't worry about that. That's my archive box. I have yet to have a problem going back and finding old emails. I've never had or recently heard of people losing their material when it's archived on the cloud. Again, because I kind of rely on the university system. It's your job to have triple redundancy in terms of servers to keep my stuff. Now, if I accidentally delete stuff, then it could be gone. But that's on me. Yeah, and like Carrie says, easy to do a search in Outlook. I used to do folders. I used to do tags. Why? I'm good at Googling things. It's one of my skills on my CV. I can think of 3 keywords to help me find that. Yep, OneDrive is definitely there. When you're coming to archiving like work product and deliverables, then it definitely makes sense. My primary source of backing a lot of stuff up is actually just the redundancy between having it on my computer as well as sending it via email. Almost all of my work does get sent via email, so I know that I can go and find these same documents either on my computer, which I prefer to do because it's better organized, or going to email and saying, okay, that's That's where that letter is. That's where that research report is as well. But like Becky says too, OneDrive is great. You can also use Google Drive to do the same thing. I typically use OneDrive more to collaborate, but it's a great way and pretty easy way to back things up. And Jan mentions too, she's got many emails. My thought is that I trash, when I go through my email right away in the morning or whenever I see it, I'll go through the whole, 30 to 100 emails, whatever it is. Trash a third of them because they're pretty junkish. Read a third of them. Maybe quick respond to some of them. The ones that get trashed right away, I never wanted archives. Anything that doesn't get trashed right away ends up in my archive. And again, there's very little cost. We have very cheap storage. Why not keep them? And it actually brings up a really important issue, and that's the misorganization. The problems with misorganization or poorly processing your stuff. If you trash it, it's gone. If you keep it, it's clutter. And I think that's one reason why it does make sense to go back and kind of revisit how you do these things, because again, you want to be as productive as possible. Yeah, and so Greg points out OneDrive for your photos. Yeah, I mean, that's actually a neat thing. So I don't have that many photos for work, but for Google, I have it, and I don't know when I set it up or how, but I have an Android phone. I live in the Google ecosystem for my personal life for the most part, and it automatically saves all of the photos I take with my camera, to Google. So it's on my Google Drive, which I happen to share with my family. So it's just done. And that's nice because I don't worry too much about space on my phone, but I do know that if I lose my phone, break my phone, accidentally delete a picture, boom, it's there. And yeah, Becky has a great point. So some stuff gets old and you're supposed to get rid of it. Other stuff you're supposed to keep. I've kept pretty much anything. But yeah, there certainly is policy. And I think that we should all revisit that stuff pretty regularly. Yep. Oh, there you go. And Jim, I'm assuming that's Jim Gray will give us an update on that. Because the one thing I certainly don't want to do, because I do a lot of contract stuff because I manage different projects, funded projects. I pretty much keep anything because I know that there's a chance that if something goes wrong or someone needs verification, that documentation becomes really, really important. And I think, for some of the things after 7 years, it's supposed to go out. Maybe. I don't know if you can really get in too much trouble for keeping old files. Although, again, I've never had space issues. Hopefully I'm not getting in trouble, Becky.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. Just want to say thank you, Dave, for a great presentation. You definitely met/exceeded expectations. So
cool.
That was good. All right. I guess I'll stop recording and yeah. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everybody.